Alright everyone, we start off today talking about Julian Assange. He's still being, of course, held in Belmarsh on spurious charges. They've ruled now that he can potentially be extradited to the United States. Whether or not that will actually happen does remain to be seen. If I was the British government, I would hold Julian Assange as leverage and say, well, what do we get out of this deal? That would be the way that politics typically works. But we do have to talk about the witch trial against him. Because, of course, Assange didn't hack anything. He did nothing illegal under any nation's laws. The fact that he's being held by a nation that has no particular legal grievance against him in the UK is a goddamn farce. The Swedes tried to persecute and prosecute him at one point. That fell through. They finally dropped that case. Now the United States wants him extradited. Now, what I suspect is that the British will hold that as leverage over the heads, again, of the United States, but he may be extradited. But he just suffered a stroke. He's 50 years old. He's under constant stress. He was effectively in solitary for an extended period. He has been abused and arguably tortured to the point where any legitimate human rights group at this point, and take that with a grain of salt because many of those groups have a spotty track record of actually caring. He's even being defended by some journos, from the legacy media no less. Now, before I get into this, and the cowardice, by the way, that's been shown by certain independent voices as well on the internet, independent content creators. They don't have a corporate contract or a master necessarily, but they're still acting like fucking pussies. Keep in mind down below there will be a pinned comment if you're watching this video on YouTube with links to other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind I make several exclusive videos most days on those platforms. Today will probably be one because I have another occult video lined up. Spurred on actually by my Salem video and some of the responses to that, so keeping that in mind, I make 4 videos every day. At least one of them is only on those platforms. Now, as to Julian Assange, WikiLeaks did nothing wrong. It's not a Russian op. They've released things that are unkind to the Kremlin on multiple occasions. It's not a partisan group. I know that it's fashionable for some people to say, well, they're basically a mouthpiece for the Trump administration. See, Orange Man bad. Therefore, ergo, Julian Assange, human rights don't apply. I've noticed, and this is conspicuous at this point, even among certain independent voices on the internet, or supposedly independent. Some of them are astroturfed, like the breadliners. I've noticed, and I'll be doing a separate video on this basic premise as well today, that a lot of people, in order to save democracy, you know, that hyperbolic star-spangled bullshit that they wave around, they want to get rid of due process, the right to self-defense, the right to speak freely, the very concept of any devolution of rights to states or municipalities over federal or even post-federal authorities, and it's become quite worrisome. And one of the foreshocks, really, of this move towards tyranny in the name of defending democracy is Julian Assange. This man has been persecuted for years and years and years. First you have the spurious Swedish charges. He flees. He gets asylum among the Ecuadorians in their embassy there in London. He goes there. They throw him under the bus. He faces no charges in the UK, to my knowledge, and yet they're still holding him in Belmarsh, to the point where he's having health issues. Now, initially the British court said, well, you can't extradite him because the U.S. prison system is effectively, it violates human rights, it violates international conventions. Well, you can't extradite him. I mean, it would be inhumane. But he's being held in the same kind of conditions there, and by the way, at this point, because of all the bad blood involving numerous governments, because WikiLeaks actually holds their toes to the fire, Panama Papers, something that disappeared from the headlines fairly quickly, long ago, by the way. Google it, or you look it up on Yandex, or maybe a better browser at this point. I think that if he were released, if the British said, well, you know, we can't extradite him because human rights, we don't have any legal case against him, he can do whatever he wants, I think he'd be shot on the steps out in front of the prison. I think they would assassinate Julian Assange. The funny thing is, WikiLeaks, of course, is still operative. It's just a personal vendetta by the deep state, by the swamp creatures against Julian Assange. And again, it's not partisan. Julian Assange, the first claim to fame, effectively, is releasing things that dealt with the Bush administration. And then the government gets all hot and bothered about it and says, well, this commie Pinko, he's trying to destroy the West. Obama gets into office. They keep releasing things. And of course, they can't boil it down to a partisan struggle, but as red meat to the Democratic base, they still try to peddle that to this day. I'm struggling to think of another individual, at least in modern times, maybe if you go back to the Middle Ages, I suppose, that's been as persecuted as Julian Assange. He's having a stroke because of the stress of his situation. He faces extradition. He's limited in his legal counsel access. He's being held under effectively torturous conditions. This is so clearly wrong that even some lamestream media groups are calling for him to be released. The Guardian just called for his release. These are legacy media. Now, to the cowards, the breadliners, some of the leftoids, and even some people on the right, by the way. It is amazing to see people that at least supposedly are not controlled by a corporation, co-opted by a government office or anything like that, don't claim to be, authoritarians. Many of them, even the leftoids, claim at least, and it's just a claim, to be more on the anarchic side of politics. It's interesting to see some of these people say, well, I don't really have a problem with this human rights violation. I don't really have a problem with the fact that he's not getting due process because he's an asshole. I just don't like him. I'm seeing people, supposedly credible individuals, they're like, well, I just don't like Julian Assange. I think he's an ass. So I don't care that he had a stroke. I don't care that he's held for 23 hours a day in isolation. I don't care that he's denied meals or medical treatment. I don't care that he might be extradited by a country that has no legal grievance against him. It's preposterous. It makes absolutely no sense. Under what premise would he be prosecuted? He didn't hack anything. He didn't encourage anyone he didn't incite hack attacks. He's a journalist. A real one, by the way, in the vein of the era in which journalism actually existed, along with some content creators, and I noticed that some of them have become goddamn pussies and won't defend Julian Assange. Now, some of them, they probably just fear that they'll be banned. Maybe they got some corporate sponsorships, and so, the money's coming in, they've got theirs, and so they're not willing to speak out against it. So you've got like the Greenwald, in some cases even leftoid like he is, like the Substack crowd, some independent creators, even a few legacy media pundits and governments as well, human rights groups saying, enough is enough. He's been persecuted for years. He's done nothing wrong. This is horseshit. And then you have this nexus of slimy, sleazy, talentless, sellout goddamn bootlickers that even include some people on new tech, let alone on like YouTube or Twitter, that are calling for him to be abused fucking more. I feel sorry for Assange. I feel sorry for his wife as well. Initially they were denied, I think, marriage or something there in Belmarsh. This is nuts. The dude is clearly being abused by a system that is afraid of him. They wouldn't be trying to cut off his tongue if they weren't afraid of what he had to say. And there are still people that say, yeah, but in this case, it's okay. It's like, yeah, it's okay if the legacy media ends up taking marching orders from the Biden admin too, violating the very concept of a free press, converting it into a quasi-state China-style press because of a democracy. We've got to defend democracy from disinformation, so we need to make sure Julian Assange can't speak. Now, WikiLeaks can still speak. They're still there. It doesn't do anything about that. It's a personal vendetta. At this point, this is just a warped, demented personal vendetta that some idiots have glommed onto, probably for goddamn clout-seeking purposes. That's about all. Peace out.